Every business leader I speak to tells me the same thing. They can't get AI deployed effectively in their organization. They don't know how, and they're frustrated because the technology clearly works, they've seen what it can do, and yet it never quite lands in their business the way the demo suggests it should. My thesis, and it's been the reason I started Beings, is that the problem is not the technology. The problem is that the business hasn't changed to meet the technology. AI doesn't fail because it's hard. It fails because the organization around it hasn't changed. Last week, something really fascinating happened that adds a new layer to that problem, and I want to use it to make a case as concretely as I can for why the business layer matters more than the model. On the 9th of June, Anthropic launched what most engineers consider the most capable AI model ever shipped. On the 12th of June, at around 5 p.m. in the US, a government order took it offline. Not for some users, for all of them. Globally, no notice, no patch window, no time to respond. Here in the UK, Al Kearns put it plainly. This week, the most advanced AI model on the planet got switched off by a foreign government. British hospitals, companies, and researchers had been using it. Even his colleague, Tom Tugendhat, former security minister, said sovereignty is now more about code than cannons. The news is covering this as an AI safety story, and I want to talk about it as a business story because the organizations that are fine this week aren't the ones with the best AI models. They're the ones that built their business so that no single supplier could switch off their capability overnight. Here's the thing, every organization affected by this did everything right. They bought from a credible vendor, they paid the premium tier, they operationalized something and it was working. The problem wasn't anything that they had done. The problem is structural. They were renting access to infrastructure that someone else could switch off, and they had no layer of their own sitting underneath it. That is the same problem I see in almost every organization I work with. Not that the AI isn't working, it's that the business has not changed enough to own the output that AI is giving them. The context, the memory, the workflows, they all live inside a supplier's system. When the supplier changes terms or changes pricing, or in this case gets shut down by a government order, the business finds out it doesn't own as much as it thought it did. Now that's not new. Every business has been here before. A supplier goes under, a platform changes its terms, a contract expires, and the renewal doubles. But the difference here is the speed. 72 hours from launch to shutdown, and the reason, a government order that UK businesses had no input into and no warning of. There are three things that I think this event illustrates, each with a practical implication for us here in the UK. First, number one. You often aren't running the model that you think you are. Here's something most people who use these models and these tools don't know. The model Anthropic launched, called Fable 5, isn't a thing. Isn't the thing. It's not a single thing. It's the AI model itself plus a control layer sitting on top that decides what the model can and can't answer. That control layer is called the harness. Depending on what you ask, the harness can quietly swap you to a different, older model without telling you. The cost adjusts. The capability drops. You asked for one thing, but you got something different. Now, I'm a big fan of Nate Jones. He runs a 160,000 subscriber AI newsletter, and he called this idea about you need to own the harness. You don't need to own the model. His point was about investment, whereas my point is about operational visibility. If your team is running a workflow on an AI tool and you don't know which model is actually processing it on any given request, you don't fully understand what you're depending on. Most businesses don't, and most suppliers don't make it easy to find out either. Point number two, your AI suppliers are not on your side. Here's the detail that most of the news coverage missed. The so-called jailbreak, which is the vulnerability that the US government cited, it was discovered by Amazon. Amazon CEO Andy Jassy raised the concern directly with senior White House officials, including Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He didn't call Anthropic first. The Commerce Department then issued the export directive that same evening, giving Anthropic 90 minutes to pull the models. Amazon is Anthropic's largest cloud partner and one of their biggest investors. They've committed up to $25 billion in total. They share a cap table. They also compete directly in the AI infrastructure market. When they found a problem, they went to the White House, not to the company itself. And that's not a one-off. That's the structural shape of this market. Microsoft is OpenAI's largest investor and integrates their models into every product they sell. Copilot, Azure, Office. In April 2026, Microsoft and OpenAI dissolved their exclusivity agreement, meaning the same models Microsoft was selling as Copilot were now free to appear in direct competitor products. The investor relationship didn't prevent the competitive move. The businesses building on those products found out the same week the press did. That's not a scandal either, that's business. But the pattern is consistent. In the frontier AI market, your vendor's primary capital investor is often also their largest competitor. Shared interests until the moment that they're not. The operational implication is simple. Your AI vendors' investors, your AI suppliers' investors, have incentives that don't align with your business continuity. And that's worth knowing when you're deciding how much of your workflow, how much of your business to operate, to route through any single supplier. Point number 3, the order creates a legal Point number 3, this order from the US government creates a legal asymmetry between your business and your US competitors. The government order is specific. It doesn't ban Fable 5 everywhere. It suspends access for foreign nationals, meaning anyone who isn't a US citizen, whether they're in Manchester or sitting at a desk in San Francisco. The model is currently offline globally because Anthropic can't verify citizenship at API level in real time. That's a technical stopgap. When they figure it out, or when the order is resolved, the intended outcome is a business in Ohio has access to a tool that a business in Manchester does not. That's not the framing the government used. Their framing is national security. But the operational reality of your competitors in the US is a meaningful capability gap. And it was created overnight by a regulatory decision your business had no input into and no warning of. This specific event will probably be resolved, but the pattern that it establishes, US export controls applied to commercial AI APIs, creating access asymmetry between US and non-US businesses, is not going away. This is the first one. It will not be the last. So what are the implications for you and your business? 3 questions every business should be able to answer about their AI setup right now. Not technical questions, supplier questions, organizational questions, the kind you'd asked about any critical supplier. Question number 1 is about exposure. If the API your team relies on most went offline tomorrow with no notice, which workflows stop? Can you name them? If you can't name them, you don't know your exposure. And that's not a criticism. Most businesses haven't mapped it yet. But it takes about 30 minutes to do, and it's worth doing. Question number 2 is context isolation. Question number 2 is context location. Does the AI your team uses know your business, your clients, your processes, your history, or does it start from scratch every time someone opens a chat window? If your institutional knowledge lives inside a supplier's system and that supplier goes offline or changes its terms or gets bought by another business, you don't just lose a tool, you lose the context you spent months building. That context is the competitive advantage. Where it lives really does matter. Question number 3, agent ownership. If you cancel your subscription to that supplier, do you keep the agent that's been doing the work that you've trained, that you've put your heart and soul into, that your teams have put their hearts and soul into and told them all about every single process that they run in your business? Or do you inherit an empty desk and start again when you lose access? Most businesses haven't asked this question because the agents are relatively new, but it's the same question you'd ask about any software-enabled process. And the answer shapes how much dependency you're comfortable building. The Fable 5 situation will probably resolve. The model may come back online, Anthropic will either patch the issue or challenge the order, but either way, the immediate disruption is temporary. What isn't temporary is the pattern. As these models get more capable, they stop being treated as commercial products and they start being treated as strategic infrastructure by governments, by regulators, by the investors who fund them. The June 12th shutdown is the first time that happened to a commercially deployed API at scale, but it will not be the last. The businesses that handle this next decade well aren't the ones chasing the highest benchmark scores on whichever model happens to be available this week. They're the ones that have mapped their exposure, know where their context lives, and own the operational layer that does the work, regardless of which model is running underneath it. I suppose the honest counter to everything I've just said is that these disruptions resolve quickly. Models come back online, Anthropic will either patch the issue or challenge the order, like I said, and the businesses affected will likely be back up and running within a few days. If your workflow can tolerate a 72-hour outage once every 2 years or so, maybe the operational risk is low, and that's a reasonable position for some businesses to hold. But I suppose the question I'm raising is really about the next one, the next time, because the next one may not resolve quickly, it may not affect everyone equally. And as I said in section 3, the asymmetry it creates between US and non-US businesses is the intended outcome of the government order. It's not a side effect. If you're not sure where your business stands on these 3 questions, that's exactly what the free assessment on the Beings website is for. It takes 15 minutes and it tells you where you're exposed before the next one of these happen. Links in the description. See you next time.